Convention. This is our first big event of the year, and we're meeting today to hear Democratic Party insights from four fabulous thinkers and speakers as part of the first 2/3 of our meeting. They include Larry Krasner, who's Philadelphia DA and is our keynote speaker for the day. Second, we have Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. John is a 2022 U.S. Senate candidate, and we should let you know he's coming to us via video as he had an 11th hour fundraising conflict that caused him to reverse his initial in-person commitment to be here. And next up, we'll have State Representative and 2022 Democratic U.S. Senate candidate Malcolm Kenyatta, who represents the 101st House District in Philadelphia. And also we have with us Jenkintown Borough, Montgomery County Council member Alex Khalil. Welcome to all of our terrific speakers. We're looking forward to hearing from you today. And then next, for the last third of our meeting, we're going to be talking about organizing a winning strategy as a first step. This is going to set the table for subsequent meetings every couple months, where we're going to come together and continue to dive into a strategic discussion. Later in the meeting, Lisa Longo will put out a call for folks interested in running for school board this year, as well as for state committee next year. But again, the second third of the meeting is going to discuss the winning elements of what comprises a strategy. Our revolution itself was founded back in 2016, and here in Pennsylvania specifically, we launched ourselves and did our very first meeting that summer of 2016, and we've continued this work going forward. Our focus has largely been on vetting candidates and welcoming candidates into races. Now we're preparing to expand our work to become much more active with and through the Democratic Party and create power on the outside in order to achieve our Justice for All agenda. So I'll stop there and call up, is Richard with us right now, Hal, or you?
Yeah, I don't believe we have Richard at this point, so I'm going to just very quickly do the introduction. And we are so excited to be working here with Our Revolution Pennsylvania. My name is Hal Ginsberg, and I'm an East Coast organizer for Our Revolution. And I'm just delighted to be working with Chuck and all the great folks. You see Sherry there on the screen. So this is really exciting to be here. We have been doing our utmost to win progressive policies, including Medicare for All. We were on the Mall just a week or so ago, and we had, you can see on that image there, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who's one of the co-lead sponsors of Medicare for All Act. So we are just really pushing hard. That is an issue we want to work closely with the folks in Pennsylvania to accomplish. So that is a major part of this meeting, is to bring folks together and to win great progressive policies like Medicare for All. And I'm going to just see if we can get a vision there of all the folks on this call. We're seeing Sherry, so I'll just leave that for now for everyone so we can see the entire group that is panelists on this great call. So we're going to move on real quick. We were hoping to have Richard Rodriguez, who is Our Revolution treasurer, and he is the Illinois chair, talk a little bit about the successes in that group. So you see Marie Newman. We endorsed her in 2020. She took on and defeated, so exciting, we were so happy, she defeated a blue dog Democrat and is moving Illinois and moving Congress to the left, fighting for a $15 minimum wage and Medicare for All, among many other policies. She's definitely part of the progressive left. So that's one way we're building a progressive party. We've got great state-level policies changed. Again, Richard was going to speak about Illinois ending cash bail there just in the past couple of weeks. And we are fighting for the People Act. That's throughout the country. So just some of the really exciting policies that we're working on. We do ask you, if you're in a position to do so, to join Our Revolution. I'm going to just quickly put in the chat a link if you get a chance, and you can click on that. We'd appreciate it. ourrev.us. You can hear me even typing mem for Pennsylvania. And with that, I'm going to turn this meeting right back to Chuck Panacchio, your lead host. Thank you, Chuck, for the time.
Oh, absolutely, Hal, and pleasure working with our Revolution National and our whole team here. It's been a great experience getting this launched and bringing all the great folks into the meeting. At this point, I'd like to call up our keynote speaker, Larry Krasner, Philadelphia District Attorney. The topic to which we want him to speak is winning in 2017, which is when he first ran and won, winning in 2021 and beyond, lessons for progressives and the Justice for All movement. And having said that, Larry is a national figure. He's someone who made a huge splash on the scene and became a very prominent figure, even associated with Bernie Sanders and our revolution, and has done amazing reform work here in the city of Philadelphia regarding questions of policing, over-policing in particular in communities of color. I'll stop there and ask Larry to come on up, somebody who's a real champion of judicial injustice reform. Larry?
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to have an opportunity to appear before our revolution. I've had the pleasure of meeting and speaking to Bernie a few times. He's in my list of heroes and sheroes because I think, our revolution and Bernie and progressives stand for the future of the Democratic Party. They stand for a Democratic Party that is inclusive, that is not going to sell us short. And I think that that's very, very important to say. The topic here, as I understand it, is winning 17, winning in 21. I'm going to confine my remarks to about 10 minutes, which I think means I got about 9 to go. But let's go straight to it. And I'm going to use my race as an example of some of the issues that we are confronting. So I am in the Democratic primary for district attorney. Obviously, in Philadelphia, you got 7 Democrats for every Republican. So the Democratic primary is the race. I am opposing a man by the name of Carlos Vega. Mr. Vega is claiming to be a reformer. Oh, really? Let us take a look. So Mr. Vega's primary endorsement comes from the leadership of the Fraternal Order of Police. And the Fraternal Order of Police is, of course, Philadelphia's police union, which is overwhelmingly controlled by its retired members. The vast majority of the membership is retired. They come to some extent or another extent from the Frank Rizzo tradition. And this is an endorsement that I refused to accept if it was even given. When I ran 4 years ago, everybody thought I was crazy to say that. And now there's a national movement in which candidates are being asked to say they will not accept an endorsement by the police union because these police unions overwhelmingly are Team Trump. Let us get more specific. The person who's running against me is endorsed by an FOP that has twice endorsed Donald Trump in a city where 7 out of 8 people are Democrats. Okay, understand that. Understand this as well. $500,000 of a $750,000 PAC for my opponent, Mr. Vega, in the Democratic primary. A man who claims to be a reformer comes from Tim Mellon. Mr. Mellon gave Donald Trump $25 million in the last election cycle. Mr. Trump is basically a very explicit racist who's completely anti-union. That's kind of what he does. He gives money to Trump, he says racist stuff, and he tries to break unions. Those are the people supporting my opponent who claims to be a reformer. They're doing something else. They have a campaign of registering Republicans as Democrats, and they have succeeded in doubling the number of Republicans who are registering as Democrats. We are seeing in Philadelphia in this election the same kinds of things that we are seeing all over the country, which is that Donald Trump is not dead. His followers and supporters are not dead, and they're finding any way they possibly can to try to suppress the will of the majority. And that will is much, much more progressive than what they're trying to impose. We've done some polling here. The people are with us. That's not the issue. The issue here is that the mainstream Democratic Party in certain instances is not with us and is to some extent infiltrated by Trumpy people. So what's the answer? What's the solution? Well, let me go back to 17 real quickly. So the DA cycle in Philly is a low turnout cycle. The top of the ticket is the DA and the city controller. Historically, this has meant a few election cycles ago, only a 9% turnout in Philly, or maybe a 12% turnout in Philly. When we ran in 2017, we surprised ourselves and everybody else by getting a nearly 19% turnout. It was an unexpected 50,000 votes in an election that came shortly after Donald Trump had won the entire state by 40,000 votes. Think about that for a second. All kinds of people who never felt inspired to get out and vote, all kinds of people who had been left behind by the mainstream Democratic Party with its centrist candidates came out. They defeated their own alienation from voting, from politics, from the mainstream Democratic Party, and they came out 50,000 unexpected votes. That is what we have to do. The bottom line is in Philadelphia now, and as we move forward, we have to get out enormous numbers of votes, and we can do it. One of the biggest things that holds us back, in my opinion, it's something I've thought about, and it's something I've written about, honestly, is that, you know, the old incumbents, the old political bosses in these various rusty machines that we have in different cities have been pretty good at convincing people that you need them. Well, here's the news. No, you don't. When I ran in 2017, there was no endorsement of any candidate for DA. That's going to happen again. You would think a Democratic Party that was all in for Biden would know that when the opponent in this race is on Team Trump, you would think that they would know who to pick. But no, they're laying low. They have done a good job, nevertheless, of convincing people that you need them. You need their assistance. You need their power. You need their ... Not really. The fact is, most of their power is completely illusory. It is an illusion. And that is why when we ran back in 2017, and I ran as an unknown, we got more votes for district attorney than any candidate in at least 20 years. And we are back to do it again. This is shaking up to be a referendum on whether a conservative Democrat is going to take us back to the lock them up forever policies of the past with a wink from a centrist Democratic Party, or a progressive candidate is going to take us to the future without needing to go through the mainstream Democratic Party, with very, very substantial support from our base, which is 60-year-old African-American women in general, African-American men, millennials, and working class white people who have been canvassed. Where we canvassed working class white people, we did incredibly well. And where we didn't in 17, we got less than half the votes from that crew, because the fact is a lot of working class white people are down with an awful lot of progressive things, even if they're not down with every single one of them. So that is where we have to go. And, you know, obviously the challenges in a pandemic are special, but it doesn't change the fact that mass texting works, that phone banks work, that canvassing can be done in different ways, and that even if you have to remotely kiss babies, as it were, even if everything is a Zoom call followed by a Zoom call followed by a Zoom call, we still have to put the time in, and we still have to do it. We have to use this mix of new school techniques and just old school diligence to get out the vote. And to the extent we are able to get out massive votes, then we are going to be able to crush gerrymandering. We are going to be able to crush what's happening in this country, which is a direct effort at minority rule. You know, I am delighted to have the chance to speak with you. I would love to have the opportunity to work more with our revolution on our campaign and on the very important U.S. Senate campaigns and other campaigns that are coming up. The governor's campaign in the near future. The future of the Democratic Party is progressives, and we are not being embraced as we should be. We have a centrist Democratic Party that for too long has tried to control the vote it had and not bring new voters in. In the short run, it served their incumbency. In the long run, it has half destroyed the Democratic Party. And the people who have been doing that need to be pushed out of the way. There has to be new leadership in the party that is going to bring in massive numbers of new votes, and then a whole lot of the world's problems are going to get solved. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to speak to you, even from the back of a, now parked but mostly bouncing car. I apologize for being unable to stay on longer. I was hoping to be able to do a roundtable, but we actually have an emergent thing happening here in Philly where I must go. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you. I hope I have the chance to do it again. Please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for everything that you do.
All right, Larry, we'll look forward to continuing the connection here. Good luck dealing with your crisis at hand, and keep fighting for us. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we got a slice of what we wanted from Larry, and we will follow up to continue asking questions about more specifically what we can do and what we should be doing to build power, to build new leadership, to build our chapters, to build a sustainable, progressive party, a winning party. And that's where we're headed throughout the day and what we'll be discussing more so on the back end of the call. So coming up, let me just bring up Karen Hollis. Karen is a professor at Villanova University, and Karen will be introducing our Senate candidates. Karen?
Yeah, hi everyone. This is so great. We have over 100 people with us today and growing. Thank you very much for coming. So real quickly, I'm just going to introduce our virtual John Fetterman, who of course, you know, is Lieutenant Governor since 2019. And he's led the fight to free the wrongfully convicted and give second chances to deserving longtime inmates, and championed the cause of legalizing marijuana on our historic tour, on his historic tour, all 67 counties in the state. And so we'll hear from him today and learn a little bit more about his plans for the Senate or his campaign.
Hey everybody, this is John Fetterman. Thank you, Our Revolution, for everything that you've done and for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So what do you need to know about today's Democratic Party? It has changed and has been fundamentally altered from activists just like Our Revolution. And for that, I want to thank you. You know, for the last 26 years, I got into public service working against the raging inequality that I realized back in the mid-90s. And think about how different our party was just 25 years ago. The infamous crime bill, ending welfare as we know it, till now we championed the $15 an hour living wage, that healthcare is a basic fundamental human right, that we need equal protection under the law for our LGBTQIA communities, that we need to end the racist war on drugs, that we need to stand and fight for the union way of life, one of the most progressive inventions, you know, within recent memory. These are the core bedrock principles and the planks of the Democratic platform of today. But the only reason that is because of activists like you. So what do you need to know about the Democratic Party, whether it's Pennsylvania or nationally? It can and has been changed by folks just like you. And I'm proud to count myself amongst you. I believe I'm the most progressive individual ever elected to a statewide office here in Pennsylvania. And I've taken those core values and issues and I've elevated them and I've advanced them. Whether that as Lieutenant Governor, reimagining and reinventing the entire criminal pardons and commutations process here in Pennsylvania, whether that is championing the racist and illegal war on cannabis and making us more just and fair and equitable when it comes to the war on drugs, or equal protection under the law for our LGBTQIA community. We have to understand that we are the party that we activate and champion and advance. And I want to thank you for the work that you've done, whether it's over the last 20 years or the mass hyper acceleration of these core values just since 2016 when Senator Sanders ran and made what was considered once a fringe ideology and now has become the boilerplate of the Democratic Party. And we can't stop. And if I'm lucky enough to be your next United States Senator, you can count. I'm going to take these issues to Washington, and I'm going to continue to carry the flag for not just progressive values, but for what common sense, good values when it comes to combating the raging inequality that threatens our very democratic fabric here in this country. So thank you for the work that you continue to do, that you're willing to do, helping deliver Pennsylvania to Joe Biden and making sure that we can begin to build on the great work that activists like you have done over the course of your careers. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm grateful, and I'll see you out in the field.
So Karen, we're Malcolm Kenyatta is trying
Yeah.
to, did he get in? Is he with us? If not, let's go on to Alex and hopefully we'll pull up Malcolm, right?
Right, great. Yes, we have a plethora of fantastic progressive Senate candidates. Our next is Alex Khalil, and Alex is a counselor on the Jenkintown Borough Council. She's also second vice president of Montgomery County Borough Association, a member of the Jenkintown Education Foundation, and Jenkintown Advisory Committee. So she's also a mom, an advocate, an organizer, an unpaid public servant, a small business owner, and educator who believes Pennsylvania's elected officials must focus on and work for the well-being and best interest of all Pennsylvanians. So without more ado, I'll turn it over to Alex. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you, Our Revolution, for having me today and giving me this opportunity to introduce myself and talk about my senatorial platform, which is community, compassion, justice, and prosperity for all Pennsylvanians. My platform calls for a Marshall Plan for the United States. I am the daughter of Palestinian Muslim immigrants from the West Bank village of Al-Mazar al-Sharqiyya, which means Eastern Farm. My parents were farmers in Palestine and were small business owners in Glassboro, New Jersey. As Karen told you, I'm a borough counselor, an attorney, an IT specialist, a small business owner, and a former adjunct at Gwinnett Mercy. And I'm an activist, but my favorite title is Mom, Daughter, and Neighbor. It is because I'm a mom that I'm an activist. I learned the importance of having a voice and being a voice, and even more importantly, to be a listener. I learned about community by working at my parents' clothing store and the grocery store I owned in Philly. My family needed the community for us to live and thrive. And for that to happen, we needed to be good neighbors and part of the community. I traveled throughout our state and the US and spent hours and days knocking on doors for President Obama, Senator Sanders, and Governor Wolf, President Biden, and Democratic candidates that you may all know: Katie Muth, Michael Doyle, Melissa Schusterman, Taylor Pacone, Daniel Frielaten, and others. I traveled from Philadelphia to Elk County in Pennsylvania on behalf of Bernie Sanders and Democrats. And I spoke to people of all races, religions, and ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds as well. And it's amazing what people told me at their front door and on the phone. I asked people, what are the issues that are important to you? And then what shocks me and surprises me and moves me is what they tell me. Mothers have told me that their children have died of cancer, drugs, violence, and suicide. I cried and hugged with the mother at her doorstep. She greeted me at her door and told me that her daughter had just died and that she didn't know how to go on living. I spoke to mothers whose children have been victims of violence and rape. I met wives, mothers, sons, daughters, and neighbors who are caretakers. I met an elderly woman from Elkins Park whose husband suffered a stroke and she was running out of money and couldn't pay her property taxes. I spoke to a woman in Hamburg, Berks County, who told me that something had to give. Her property taxes and her prescription drug costs were becoming too much. I spoke to a son in Lower Providence who was working 2 jobs and caring for his mother with Alzheimer's. Across the state and the country, I spoke to people with no health care and who were suffering food insecurity and job loss. When I was elected to Borough Council, I was told point blank by a local Democrat that I was elected because it was known by the community and in the community that I would speak up. I promise you that I will always speak up on your behalf, the people of Pennsylvania. I will listen, I will advocate, I will compromise with your permission, and I will go to Washington, D.C. with one focus in mind: serve the people of Pennsylvania. In 1941, the young men and women of the United States, our pride and treasure, went to Europe to free the world from fascism. In addition to losing thousands of our soldiers in World War II, the United States donated what is today $202 billion in economic and technical assistance to help the recovery of European countries, including the Netherlands, Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, Japan, and others. These countries, most notably the Netherlands, the home of energy giant Royal Dutch Shell, and Germany, the home of luxury cars of BMW, Mercedes, Audis, and Porsche. Switzerland, and Japan now have thriving economies and are beacons of capitalism, and yet all have universal healthcare programs as a human right, have negotiated affordable health prescription drugs for their citizens. Our European allies have high minimum wages, strong unions, and are part of the EU Green New Deal. Their public universities, colleges, and trade schools are heavily subsidized, and in the case of Germany, they're for free. When the COVID pandemic hit the world last year, all the European citizens that the US freed from fascism and gave billions of dollars to rebuild their country had guarantees of health care, affordable prescription jobs, and job protection by their governments. American citizens were largely left to fend for themselves. I support the progressive agenda because of its laser focus on improving the lives of Americans today and in the future. I support the ending of bribery in politics, a $15 minimum wage, a Green New Deal, and Medicare for all. My platform focuses on education and apprenticeship training. My commitment to you is to fight for proper funding of our schools and the rebuilding and modernizing of our public school buildings and our infrastructure. I will focus on small businesses and the American worker, including creating American jobs in Pennsylvania for Pennsylvania. I will focus on workers' rights and workers' safety. I will fight for economic justice that includes a public bank for Pennsylvania and environmental justice, Native American rights, human rights, regenerative farming, and remediation and protection of our water, air, soil, and land rights. And above all, I will fight for equitable justice and policing in all communities across our state. I want to thank our revolution for all that it has done to bring about the progressive agenda and progressive policies and helping progressive candidates in Pennsylvania. To learn more about my platform, please go to alexkhalilforusenate.com. Thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you, Alex, for those inspiring words. And we want to wish you really good luck on your campaign. And we have our next candidate coming up now, Malcolm Kenyatta, who has been a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives for the 181st District. And Malcolm, some of the things he has done while in the PA State House he's been championing proposal to address generational poverty, raise the minimum wage, protect workers' rights, increase access to mental health care, stem the rise of gun violence, and protect our digital infrastructure. So for all that, we thank you, Malcolm, and welcome to our broadcast from Our Revolution.
All right, I think I'm unmuted here. Okay, I'm good to go. Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you. You know, I would be remiss to not start first and foremost acknowledging Passover for all those who are celebrating, and also acknowledging the Sabbath, which is today. And so to all my Jewish brothers and sisters who will watch this later, just want to celebrate with you today. You know, we are at right now in this country, we're at a fundamental crossroads. We really are. What we do next is going to be not just important to us, but important to our kids and to our grandkids, what we do next. You know, this is not the first time this country has found itself at a crossroads. And if history is any guide, it won't be the last time we find ourselves here. You know, when you think about so many of those foundational American documents that talked about freedom and justice and fairness, pursuit of happiness. When I just look and just scroll through some of the folks who are on this call, our founders weren't always talking about me, and they certainly weren't talking about many of the people who are on this call right now. But what has happened every generation is a new generation of leaders have stepped up, stood up, and demanded that we expand that promise to actually include all of us, Just yesterday, a good friend of mine, Representative Park Cannon, was arrested in Georgia for knocking on the door of the governor's office as he was signing one of the most regressive voter suppression laws since the 2020 election. Laws and proposals that we see introduced, it feels like every single day here in the State House. Laws that want to take away the thing that is most fundamental to a democratic republic, is whether or not everybody is able to vote. Last year, I spent more days than I would have liked in committee hearings, debating with colleagues about something that is so central to the functioning of our democracy. And so when I talk about that crossroads that we're at, one of the decisions we have to make is whether or not in the United States, every single person is going to be enfranchised, or whether or not folks who are enemies to voting rights, equal protections, whether or not they rule the day. When I think about the crossroads we're at, I also think about whether or not everybody's going to have access to high quality healthcare. Everybody. I watched as a kid my mom ration her insulin to make sure she could feed me and my siblings. I lost my mom at 27. Lost my dad a couple of years before that. And I think about all the time whether or not she would still be here with me, with us, if she had access to good quality healthcare. And the sad thing about my story is not that just I lost my mom, but it's that this story is not unique. In the wealthiest country in the world, this story is not unique. How disgraceful and despicable that something as central as healthcare is not a guarantee in the United States. And at this crossroads, we have to decide what we're going to do about that. Whether or not we're going to get to Medicare for all, or whether or not we're going to continue to have stories like mine be the norm in Pennsylvania and be the norm in this country. When we talk about the crossroads, we have to talk about the epidemic of gun violence. Just last night, a couple of blocks outside of my district, 7 people were murdered, shot down in a mass shooting in Northern Liberties. This on top of the murder that we saw of 8 people in Georgia, many of the AAPI community, murdered because of white supremacy, the virus that it is. We have it within our ability to do something about this epidemic of gun violence, an epidemic that is stealing the lives of so many young Black men who look like me, who come from the same community that I come from, whose lives are cut short, whose families will never be the same. And then we have policymakers act as if there's nothing we can do about it. This faux powerlessness in the face of proposals that we know could stem the tide. I have a bill that I introduced with Representative Sanchez and was just at a press conference reintroducing it with Ceasefire Pennsylvania just a couple of days ago that would do something about lost and stolen guns. In my district, 80+% of folks who die by homicide at the hand of a firearm are folks who died at the hands of a lost or stolen gun, an illegal gun. And yet, we see casualty after casualty, mass shooting after mass shooting, and we haven't done a damn thing. At this crossroads, we have to decide if we accept that or not. At this crossroads, we have to decide whether or not we do something about what I have called for years the moral and economic issue of our generation, deep poverty. I grew up in an incredibly working, poor family. My parents divorced when I was very young. My dad was a social worker. My mom was a home health care aide. We got evicted and moved 4 or 5 different times as a kid. Come home from school, my mom's like, pack everything you have into some plastic bags because we can't afford to stay here anymore. I know exactly what it's like to have my lights cut off, to not know where my next meal is coming from. I've been on both sides of the growing food lines that we see all across the country and all across the state. And yet the current Senator, Pat Toomey, said everything's fine. He said the economy is roaring. And yet when I was in Western PA in Aliquippa, talking to the folks leading the food bank there, they said that just from last February, the need had increased 59%. And yet Pat Toomey says everybody's fine, everything's going okay. Give me a break. It's not going okay. And so when I talk about this crossroads, we have to have leaders that understand in their bones what is at stake right now. Whether or not we do something on the existential threat of climate change is not just an issue I talk about because politically people say it's a good issue to talk about, but because it directly determines whether or not myself and my future kids and my future grandkids, I'm already an annoying grandparent and I don't even have grandkids yet, whether they have a planet that they can live on and thrive on. Whether or not we do something about the young people in my district who prior to COVID were seeing record levels of absenteeism because young people were having dramatic asthma attacks that were leaving them hospitalized. And I worked with the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers around that, about how we can work with the school district and others to do something on these issues. It's the reason I'm the co-chair of Climate Power with Representative Sarah Innamorato, where we worked all last year to make this an issue that people voted on, but also an issue that we hold every elected official accountable on. We have to have leaders that understand these issues in their bones, in their bones. Every couple of years, we get folks who are millionaires, who run a bunch of ads, telling us how much they give a damn about poor and working families like mine. We see the commercials, right, where everybody's fumbling through the bills and they tell you how much they care about those families. But how about, for once, we actually just have a working person be the person? How about we actually allow working people to stand up and speak for themselves? We don't need a mascot. We need a movement. We don't need a cult of personality. We need to build a coalition, a big coalition that centers these issues and does what we have to do to get it done, to get it done. That's what this campaign is about. That's what every campaign is about. Not just about the names of the folks who are on the ballot, but ultimately it's about you. It's about your family. It's about your loved ones. It's about your communities. I'll end with this note from where I first got involved to this campaign right now. You can draw a direct line. I was 11 years old and I was living on this block called Woodstock Street, which is in my now district. I'm third generation to my district. My grandfather, Muhammad Kenyatta, who you should all go Google and learn about, was a civil rights activist as well. And I'm living on this block and I come home one day complaining to my mom about all these things that I didn't like on the block. And my mom was sweet as pie, but she was a tough ass black lady. She just was. There's no other way to put it. She was tough. I walked in the house and I'm complaining. And my mom, without skipping a beat, she said, well, boy, if you care so much, why don't you go do something about it? And I was like, oh, okay. And I ran for junior block captain. It was the first thing I ever did in terms of getting civically engaged. And it gave me two things that I'll never ever forget. One, nobody is coming to save us. Nobody is coming to save us. And certainly I have opponents in this race, but these are all good folks who in their own way, in their own communities, have stepped up because nobody's coming to save our communities. But this is the good news. And this coalition that you have on this call right now is proof positive of the second point I'm about to make. We don't need anybody to come save us. We don't need anybody to come save us. Because there's nothing we can't do when working people step up, speak from our lived experience, and organize together. It's nothing we can't do. And when you think about every moment of substantive change, that's the way it happened. When myself and Summer Lee and members of the Black Caucus took over the speaker's rostrum in an act of civil disobedience, held that rostrum until the speaker agreed that we were going to move some bills around police reform, it didn't just happen because Rep. Lee and I did that. It happened because there were protests in 61 of 67 counties demanding that we actually do something. And you all on this call know to get 61 of 67 counties to do something in Pennsylvania, that's tough. That's tough. But that is how you move legislation. That's how we accomplish the things we care about, like canceling student debt, like getting healthcare for everybody, like seeing housing as a human right. On all of the issues, insert issue, the way you do it is the way we do it as organizers all the time. You're clear about what you're fighting for. You're clear about centering marginalized people. And then you build a big ass group of people to get it done. That is the way we get big things done in government. It's the things that I've learned as an organizer. It's what so many of you know from your lived experience on the call right now. And it's what we have to do in the United States Senate. And so I want to thank you for this opportunity to spend some time with you. I don't know what is supposed to happen next. If I'm ending here, then thank you so much. If there's a question or whatever, then I'll answer the question.
Hi, once again, thank you so much for that rousing speech, Malcolm. And we're going to get to talk to you more, as well as the other two wonderful candidates that we have for Senate just coming up right now. We have a roundtable discussion that will be led by Jeff Kennedy and Kristen Volchansky, and they are our Rev Pennsylvania leaders based in Harrisburg. Jeff also hosts a online radio show called The Other Side of Information. So many of you may want to look for that because it's a very progressive voice. So I'll turn it over to you, Jeff and Kristen.
If I could jump in real quickly, just to point people to the chat box, Karen. We've got a lot of links for, we want to get folks to take a survey here. And the candidates can put your link information into the boxes. Other organizations, if people want to put their links into the chat box so that we can make this into a networking event as well, right? We can multitask and make those connections that Malcolm and Alex were talking about. We have to link ourselves. We have to get out of our silos. We have to understand each other's issues and grow our empathy and grow our movement and grow our power. So Jeff and Kristen, thanks so much for doing that. The roundtable discussion. Looking forward to it. Thank you. And Karen, thank you as well.
Well, welcome everybody for being here. Thanks for sticking in for the roundtable discussion. Ms. Khalil, Councilor Khalil, and Rep Kenyatta, thanks for hanging out and staying with us for a roundtable discussion. I realize that the topics that we're going to get to are topics that we could talk about for probably weeks on end. They are complex and have many, many layers to them. I'm sure we won't be able to break down everything, but I'm hoping that we can bounce some ideas for those in the room and ideas that we can take away from the room today. And please remember, everybody that's here today, including yourselves, Councilor and Representative, that this is just the first in a series of meetings that we will be having every other month. They are planned. Every 2 months, our Revolution Pennsylvania will be getting together to discuss issues like this and other issues going forward. So this is just a kickoff. We hope you will be with us every other month. Pay attention, put your emails in the chat, contact information. There is also a form, a polling form inside the chat where you can drop information, and stay tuned with us for these exact type of discussions as we go forward. As Karen and Chuck mentioned, my name is Jeff Kennedy. I'm the host of The Kennedy Effect. We take the air live every Sunday evening from 5 p.m. Eastern Time, about between 80 and 90 places across the Facebook universe, and live globally via hot101.net. And this is the brains behind the operation, Kristen Volchansky. So, Rep and Councilor, I wanted to kick off the roundtable by asking you a bit of a broad question, and I guess it's kind of intentionally broad to get your thoughts. The Democratic Party was formed back at the beginning of the founding by Jefferson and Madison themselves. They fought for a progressive tax system, the estate tax, the inheritance tax, to, in their words, and I quote, to prevent the establishment of a permanent upper class. We are the party of Roosevelt and Kennedy and Johnson the New Deal, the Moonshot, the Peace Corps, the Great Society. And in the 90s, the party took a 90-degree right turn. And I use that term not by accident. The party had been deprived of its traditional funding sources, with unions being torn down by Reagan rather intentionally to deny the party its funding. A lot of quote unquote leaders from that era are still seated at the highest levels of our party, whereas I believe that the party continues to find its roots again in the New Deal Democrats. So we call them progressives. I tend to look at them as the New Deal Democrats. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. If I might start with the counselor, where is the party now? What do you see as the Democratic Party? Who are we?
I can tell you who I am, but the party itself is a mishmash, really. And I think it's interesting you pointed out Jefferson. Yes, Jefferson believed in a progressive tax and whatnot, but Jefferson was also a slaveholder. So I think that we have to remember that there is still a pocket, whether it's a Jefferson or in any party, that has bigotry associated with it. The New Deal was a great effort by the Democrats to help the American people. I think what happened was this idea of helping the American people became something like a faux pas. Oh, we don't want to do that. And we just sort of lost sight. Well, let me step back. We actually fell into the propaganda that helping the American people was bad, that healthcare was, as a human right, was bad. This term socialism. And so we allowed what I call the corporate media to totally control the agenda and the voice. They never talk, I'm going to talk about the Affordable Care Act, for example. I was a big supporter of the Affordable Care Act, and yet we couldn't find even Democrats to support it. Why? Because they were afraid. The media kept saying, well, you're going to take down that socialism, you're going to take away people's health care. And they did nothing to educate the community about what the Affordable Care Act could do. The only thing they were great at doing was scaring. So I think, to me, the Democratic Party is activists like us. We're the future, because if we don't communicate to the country about really the important issues, you're going to hear just junk media. So I think that is where the importance of where we are as a party. People like Our Revolution and others who sit back and say, I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to really reach citizens one-on-one and hear what is going on in their community. And that was what was great about the New Deal, is that it really helped individuals in communities, and as a whole, we prospered. I hope that made sense.
Representative Kenyatta? I think you're muted.
You're still muted, Rep. Representative, you're still muted.
So here I am, finally unmuted. What I was saying was, the host has the muting ability here. But first of all, I want to, I think everything that Councilmember Khalil just said is correct. But let me say this and go a step further. When I talk about having a government that looks like the fullness of the American experience, that actually does, that is key. And this is not about empty symbolism. And this is not about the so-called identity politics. Everybody has an identity, okay? And with my identity and with the identity of some folks on this call, we've had certain lived experiences that are key to how we govern, And so what we talk about so often when we're talking about candidates is really, how do we move around the same couple of candidates and just put them in different positions? The same couple of people with the same sort of backgrounds, who went to the same sort of schools, who come from the same similar communities. And then I have had to do this multiple times, where there's some candidate who gets the nomination and then they say, Malcolm, can you introduce this person to people in your community and convince folks in your community that they're going to care about deep poverty, that they're going to care about lack of health care, that they're going to care about our schools and our infrastructure and all these different things, when the reality is, how about instead of the Democratic Party having a so-called message that centers working people, how about we actually just center working people? How about we just actually do it? Instead of trying to come up with ways to, like, how do we trick people? How do we say the right thing to convince working people that we're for them? How about we actually have the folks who lead the party be working people? Look at the composition of Congress. 50+% of them, millionaires. Millionaires. The former senator who now Senator Warnock beat, almost a billionaire, literally. And yet she was running ads talking about how much she cared about working people. I mean, give me a freaking break. And so what I think is we have to center people who understand what it feels like when government doesn't work, because they're on the front end of it. They're on the front end of it. And so if we want to talk about labor rights, let's lift up labor leaders. If we want to talk about women's rights, let's elect more women. If we want to talk about queer people and Black people, let's elect more queer people and Black people. That is the way we have a party that doesn't just talk to these communities, but that actually allows these communities to lead from within. And I think that that's a really big part of it.
Thank you, sir. And I think just to add to what you just said, so often when we do talk about working people in the media and in the party, we're talking about a certain type of working person that is very narrow and privileges whiteness and class, when the reality is that working people and working class people are very diverse. But we very much narrow that that conversation. And I think that's something as a party that we need to grapple with. We can't possibly escape, the history of that.
May I add a point to what you just said, which is so on point? When we talk about rural America, right, we have this image, and we've actually, it's a caricature, right, of how rural America. What, in my experience, however, in rural America is that I've met people of all religions. Many of the small business people who are in rural America are immigrants or African Americans or from Africa, immigrants from Africa. I mean, it's and Hispanics. They're small business people. And what happens is, what I find interesting is that they're voting Republican, and they even voted for Trump. And when you ask why, it's because there's tax policy. I mean, every broken clock is right twice, right? That says, hey, Trump's tax policy helped my small business. And that is, it's amazing. As I told you, I'm a Palestinian American, and Trump was no friends of the Palestinian people. But so many Palestinian small business people, Syrians, Hispanics voted for Trump because he really did have excellent, and I'm going to say it, use the word excellent small business tax policy. I spoke to a gentleman out in Schuylkill County who told me he was a small business person. He said he had the best tax cut of his entire career, his entire business under Trump. And so I listened to that and go, wow, okay. Otherwise, he was basically a Democrat, he had told me. He had actually voted for President Obama at one time. So to me, we need to get away from caricature and sit back and say, oh yeah, all rural people or all working class people are this way, and realize that it's a very diverse people that we're talking to, and that with the right ideas and actually going out and talking to them. I mean, the reason why we've had such a hard time in rural America is in Pennsylvania is for the longest time, we couldn't even get Democrats to run in rural Pennsylvania. We couldn't even get Pennsylvanians to go, Democrats to go outside of their comfort zone. You either won parts of Montgomery County, Philadelphia, a little bit of Bucks County, and that was it, in Allegheny County. But everybody else, the Democratic Party was not to be seen. So I think because we've listened to this stereotype, so that to me is what I think we need to break away from. Sorry to take so much time.
Let me see if I can build on that, Rep.
Please, go ahead.
Let me see if I can build on that comment a little bit, because this is something that I get a lot of pushback on While I am not physically wearing a hat at this moment, I wear a lot of hats. I am partner in a political consulting firm. I host this global program. I'm a member of my county committee here in a little swing county you may have heard of called Northampton. And I seem to carry a sense that not everyone agrees with, that we as a Democratic Party who have lost most, if not all, of what we deem rural Pennsylvania, if not rural America. I happen to think it was bought out from under us, but perhaps that's a discussion for another day. That we need to go out and listen to rural Pennsylvania. No, I think we need to go talk to rural Pennsylvania and remind them of what the Democratic Party has done for them. Going back again to the New Deal: schools, roads, power systems, post offices, dams, land remediation, and so on. Again, it goes back to the New Deal. People will then tell me, well, those are 90-year-old programs. Fine, I'll bring you up to today. No fracking. Actually try to save your farmland so you can, I don't know, do crazy things on it like grow food. Have schools where you don't have 30, 45 kids in a class, but the 15 to 18 that are recommended, a living wage, and, crazy ideas like that. Where sit you, Representative Kenyatta? Do we need to go out and passively listen to rural America, or do we need to remind them that of the two quote unquote parties in America, although I only think there's one left and that happens to be ours, the other one's a corporation, that there's only one party who's actually trying to help them. The other one is simply funneling money to the top.
Well, let me disagree with you right at the top here. I don't even think they're a corporation. The Republican caucus, certainly here in Pennsylvania, has become a cult, and that's all it is. We saw folks literally bowing before a golden statue of the former president at CPAC, and that gives you a real sense of the zeitgeist of the party right now. It is a cult. And so I think that's even worse than, a transactional sort of corporation. Let me say this. I think we need to do a couple of things. I think, first of all, I've learned over time, you don't get the vote you don't ask for. You don't get the support you don't ask for. You don't get the donation you don't ask for. And so we have to show up. We have to show up. And not just in rural communities. You look all across Reading and Lancaster, where there are so many Latino voters who stayed home this last election. They didn't vote for Trump. They didn't vote for Biden. They stayed home. They said, none of you are actually listening to me, talking to me, engaging with me in any way. We do the same thing with Black voters. I can't tell you how often, 6 weeks before the election, everybody's like, oh my God, are Black men gonna come out to vote? Let's go to a barbershop and have a conversation with Black men at the barbershop a couple of days before the election. I hope they come out and vote. And this is what we've done with our field programs. We all get the turfs. Well, let's just go talk to the people who always vote. These other people, they don't really vote. And so we only have a little bit of time, so we can't really go talk to them. And then they don't vote. And so then the next election, we say, oh, well, we can't go talk to them because they didn't vote last time. And we do the same thing in rural communities. Well, they voted for Republicans last time, so I don't know if we really go and knock on that door. So I don't know if we really go and invest any media money in that media market. Those people are they're just going to vote for, give me a break. Give me a break. What Republicans did very strategically 10 years ago, they invested, I believe it was $10 million in the state legislature around the last census. They have held the state legislature every year since. Every year since. They are electing folks for school board. They are electing folks, I think Councilor Khalil was right. They are electing folks, people are running in these communities. We don't show up, they don't vote for us, and then we use it as an excuse to not show up. And so it's a really cyclical thing. But the other thing that I think is important here is, after the former president won, every media organization found a diner, freaking lived outside of the diner, and we're going in to ask people, hey, do you still support Trump? Do you still support Trump? Do you still support Trump? And if their answer wasn't, no, I've completely changed my mind, I don't support Trump, then they say, oh, well, it's a failure. we have to also understand that there is a new coalition that exists for us as well. And so there are certain people, we will talk to them, we will engage. They might not vote for us, but it doesn't mean we can't win elections in Pennsylvania. You look at state house seats in Delco. There are colleagues who I work with who are the first Democrat in their seats since the Civil War, And so do we say, well, no, ignore these voters who have historically voted Republican, who are now becoming more core Democratic constituency, to go back and try to get voters who were with us 50 years ago, who aren't with us now? That might not be the right approach. And as we have a Democratic Party that is more focused, and rightfully, on marginalized people, on Black folks and brown folks, on LGBTQ people, on our trans community, on immigrants, there are going to be some people who say, I'm not down with that. I don't want to focus on that. I don't want to talk about that. But the Democratic Party ought to be talking about those things. And we ought to be talking about it in a way that really talks about the interconnectedness of our experience as Pennsylvanians, right? If you have a kid in Philadelphia who doesn't have high-speed internet because they can't afford it, and because Comcast pays zero goddamn taxes, or you have somebody in Greene County who doesn't have internet because we haven't built out the infrastructure, the reality is they don't have internet. And so we as Democrats can have a conversation about how to bridge that gap, but also have a conversation about the ways in which that particularly disadvantages poor people, working people, and communities of color. So we have to do both. Go everywhere, talk to everybody, but we also have to embrace our party as it exists now. And I'm happy that we have a party that, when you look at the exit polls, 73% plus of young people are voting for us. That's a good thing. And we ought to be listening to them and centering the things that they care about, and not just asking, how do we get voters from 70, 80 years ago to be with us? The politics of the past is not going to allow us to build the future that we want to build.
If I may add to something to what the state rep said, I think also we have not invested, and I'm glad you brought up the internet, because to me it was disgraceful to hear children standing outside fast food places because they didn't have internet at home. I truly believe that if Comcast and other providers will not pay for to get infrastructure changes, we provide funding so they can build their own. And it's done. It's been done in Detroit. We can do it in Pennsylvania. If you go through rural Pennsylvania, especially in coal mine country, and they went off, and it was very strategic. We're moving away from coal. Does that mean there's no work for coal miners? Really good paying jobs for coal miners? No, there's great paying jobs. We have $15 billion worth of mine reclamation, right? So we didn't even think as Democrats, hey, let's go put some money there. We didn't even think that, for those of us here who all support the Green New Deal and the technology that goes with it, didn't think back and say, hey, the folks in the Netherlands are now using geothermal in old coal mines. We could use that in Pennsylvania. Instead, we went to the Netherlands and we got Royal Dutch Shell to use our gas. We gave the third wealthiest company in the world $1.6 billion to come and create more plastic. So I think when we sit back and want to invest, we are not investing in rural America. That is a fair statement and accurate statement. You go to places like Tamaqua, you go to places like in Carbon County, in Schuylkill County, up in Elk County, and you're like, whoa, how come there's no investment here? So there's no investment there. The governor doesn't go there. And I like Governor Wolf, right? I'm a big fan of Governor Wolf, but he doesn't go visit them. Okay. Democrats don't go visit them. So who visits them? The people who are actually hurting them. They go knock on their door. They make sure they do some constituent services, but jobs, infrastructure, the New Deal, right? That New Deal where we went off and created jobs is not there. So we lost them because we didn't even try to make their lives better in the most proper way possible, which is providing them with careers, jobs that were careers. Instead, we took away jobs, right? Because coal is not sustainable. And then we said, go work in a warehouse. No, those warehouse jobs, they pay not even paying minimum wage. I mean, they're paying minimum wage. Yeah, go get that. So I really sit back and see that we do bear some of the we bear some of the blame by not actively engaging in jobs, in infrastructure, and finally, and actually in dialogue. Now, we don't have to agree with them. We can sit back and say, no, you may not use that. We do not believe in your and do not support any discrimination policies against any community, LGBT, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, etc. But we left the void. The only voices there, the only voices that were going into rural communities were folks who supported the Ku Klux Klan. Let's be blunt.
Thank you so much for this discussion. And just to jump in here and kind of bring us full circle, as an individual who grew up in rural Pennsylvania and, proudly is from the center part of the state, and some of my friends from the Hub for Progress are online right now, this is something that we're spending a lot of time working on, is how to better organize in rural regions and understanding that within rural America and rural Pennsylvania, the culture and the needs are very different from community to community. My community's needs in Center County, where I grew up, are very, very different from even Northumberland County, which is a neighboring county. So to wrap up, could you each give us 2 specific things that your campaigns are doing to engage rural voters since you are running a statewide race?
Councilor, do you want to go first? Whatever you
want. My campaign will involve, thank you, State Rep. I will be out in those counties. I will be staffing in rural counties. I will be really targeting and discussing jobs in rural counties, and also be talking about many state issues that can be resolved that can be helped at the federal level. I have to tell you, I really, based on just what's going on here in our county and in the city, this crazy thing has seemed to have occurred where if you rent a house, right, that's a bad thing. I've heard it in Montgomery County, and I've heard it in Schuylkill County, where it's crazy, right? And so I really think we even need to sit back and talk and change funding of education and make sure at the federal level we're providing proper funding for education across the state. And so I think it is what I plan to do and am doing is going to rural communities, knocking on their doors, talking to them, talking to the Democratic leaders, talking to any person, every person, knocking on Republican doors. I have already. I've done it as a private citizen. I did it for Taylor Pacone. I went up to in Schuylkill County, Carbon County. I should tell you, I'd like to talk real quick. I don't mean to about Taylor Pacone. Democrats rejected him because some Democrats rejected him because he was either too conservative or he wasn't too liberal or whatever it was. And he was the first candidate to run in that county, the first Democrat to run in that area for 10 years. Can you imagine not having a Democrat knock at your door for 10 years? I will be knocking on those doors because I have knocked on those doors. I will be listening, talking, and engaging and hiring staff in those areas. I could use your support and your donations. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor, and thank you for what you said. I think 2 things. This is first and foremost. We have to not be full of shit. Okay, that's the first thing. We really do. My bachelor's and my master are both in communication, and I think that we continue to talk about this as a communications issue. It's not a communications issue. It's an authenticity issue. Do we actually give a damn about these folks in this community? Or do we just want to get more of their votes and then we go back to not giving a damn about them? So we have to genuinely care about these communities, and I genuinely do. And I've heard from folks, and some people say it loudly, some people say it quietly, but certainly it's an elephant in the room for some folks. Oh my gosh, can a Black guy win statewide in Pennsylvania? You watch me do it. And we're going to do it with a lot of your help. And a part of the way we do it is we show up and actually talk to people. There are these folks in Reedsville, the Biden barn, folks learned about it It was burned down by two folks, two young men who burned it down. I met that family because I was out in Central PA campaigning with my good friend Peter Buck, who ran against Leader Benninghoff and who's now running for school board. And we went to the smallest communities in his district on the back of the Buck truck, singing and talking about what we could do for these communities, actually getting to know people. And, you know, I came to that house, big barn, 100 years old, with folks who look nothing like me, who don't love like me, who brought me into their homes and into their hearts so quickly it would have made your head spin, and who wanted to talk about so many of the same issues that we're talking about right now. And so the first thing we have to do is build authentic relationships. This is not about tricking people into voting for us. This is about having something to actually offer to people and then making sure we tell them about what we have to offer. The second piece is having something to actually offer to them, having an agenda that actually centers rural Pennsylvanians. You know, it shocks people who don't know about Pennsylvania that our biggest industry is agriculture. It's agriculture. And so I don't know how the heck we're going to have a state where we just care about Philly and Pittsburgh and say, well, rest of the state, good luck, even though you are where most of the energy in our economy actually comes from. It doesn't make sense. The problem is it has been a strategy for folks for years and years and years to say, let me just win this county, this county, this county, drive up my vote count in this counties, and then forget the rest of the counties. There are folks who have a strategy that says, well, you know, if I win everything west of Harrisburg, you know, and I don't have to come to Philly, or if I win Philly in the suburbs, then I don't have to go to the rest of the state. That might be some cynical way to get elected, but it's a crap way to govern and to actually deliver for people. What we have to do is actually give a damn, and then we have to actually deliver on the things that we're talking about. And Jeff and Kristen, you both said this. Good schools, not a partisan issue. Healthcare, when you get sick, don't have to go bankrupt, not a partisan issue. Being able to have a small business or a small farm not go bankrupt because you have one bad season, not a partisan issue. Doing something about COVID and rebuilding this time in a real way that lifts up all of our communities, not a partisan issue. And so it's not about what Democrats say, it's about what we do. And until we actually do something that lifts up these communities, we don't deserve their votes. You don't deserve somebody's vote because you have a D next to your name or because you have an R next to your name. You deserve folks' votes based off of whether or not you have a real agenda that's going to lift up their lives. Lift up their lives. After every election, I promise I'll end here. After every election, people quickly look at who won and who lost and draw a bunch of information from that. They glean a bunch from that. The number I always look at first is how many people didn't vote. I look at that number all the time with great interest of how many people that didn't vote. And just think about it. We had an election with billions of dollars spent, okay? Billions of dollars. I mean, for Christ's sakes, I put ice cream trucks all around my damn district to get people to come out. People had DJs. Everybody was working their butts off in this last election. And yet, there were still so many people who said, I hear Trump, I hear Democrats, I'm still not interested. That is a failure of us actually delivering. And I will tell you, I've lived in a community and still do right now where government hasn't delivered. And so when we talk to people and say, how do we get them to vote? The first thing is we have to not treat them like they're crazy. Government hasn't worked for them. But the way we get it to work is if we step up and make sure we are centered. And that means having candidates that are from these communities that have been hurting, be the ones to be the voice. And so that's what this campaign is all about. If folks can go to malcolmkenyatta.com, you can get engaged with the campaign. And I really, really want to thank you all on a Saturday, taking the time to talk about these issues.
Well, and thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Khalil, for joining us. Councilwoman Khalil, I'm sorry.
No, thank you so much. This is an honor. And thank you, State Rep. And thank you,
Yes,
Jeff and
you
Kristen.
too.
Thank you. This is wonderful. And I think we need more conversations like this. Whatever happens in this campaign, we need to make Pennsylvania better. We need to help the people of Pennsylvania and know that there's a future. that their children know that they know that their children have a future, they have a future. And Alex Khalil for ussenate.com, please take a look at my site. And thank you again. It was an honor and a pleasure.
Well, both of you, thank you so much for being with us again, as the rep mentioned, on a Saturday, and what appears to be pretty nice weather Saturday. Thank you for being here. Everybody in the room, I just want to mention a couple of things. I would be very lax if I did not mention my own program. Both of you have an open invitation to the program. In fact, Rep, I got to tell you, I've reached out to you a bunch of times to be on the program. I hope you will. I have, I swear. I
will be on, and I'm actually in Harrisburg randomly enough, so I will be on.
Scout's honor, I have. So here from the Great Lehigh Valley, we would wish both of you to come to the program and visit us, have an extended conversation on these topics and more. The invitation is open to you.
How would I contact you?
We can do that offline, or we can do it in the chat. But also for everyone who's in the room, after the formal program ends, we will keep the Zoom open and continue this chat. Well, first off, the two of you are welcome to hang and stay. I'm sure you may have Representative and Councilor, you may have a schedule. If you do not, you are welcome to stay here. You do not have to scoot off, or unless you have a schedule. But you are welcome to hang in as we move on with the rest of the program. After the formal program ends, we will keep the Zoom open to keep the discussion going. And for all the participants who have been muted and have been just viewers of this so far, we'll let you have your say and try to have this discussion and have your thoughts joined in and continue. But for now, this ends the Joe and Mika part of the show. Everybody needs to be heard, so we will move on. I want to thank everybody for being here and thank Our Revolution PA, of which we are a proud part, and for allowing us to take over this bit of the program. Let's get it back to Chuck Panaccio to get into the strategy for Our Revolution PA inside and outside, and Lisa Longo to talk about the importance of 2021 and the local races throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.